Oh my god! Oh, look like Catman do. Tells you a lot about the animal kingdom. Just him kind of stumbling around. He's like fumbling out of bed and stumbling to the kitchen.
Oh, really?
Hello, everybody.
Hi there.
And welcome to
Evil
Asterisk Podcast with Jeannie
And Luis.
We just watched The
Animal
Kingdom. Not to be confused with Animal Kingdom without the. It was...
Wild.
Yes.
I don't know how to do
In more ways than one.
animal sounds. Like, okay.
All right. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and read the IMDb description because this will tell us what we can talk about and what we cannot talk about before the spoiler section. Here goes. An adventure between a father and his son in a world where some humans have started mutating into other animal species. There you go. We can talk about that.
Yes.
That is the premise.
The mutations are not spoilerish.
No. I will also read some of the genres associated with this film. Very interesting mix. Body horror, coming of age, dystopian sci-fi, folk horror, which rears its head again, adventure, drama, just plain horror, mystery, and sci-fi. Not whodunit.
No.
Not a whodunit this time. The Animal Kingdom. It's a French film.
From each year?
It is from 2023.
I thought it was older. I thought it was 2021.
No, and it's directed by Thomas Cailley and co-written by Thomas Cailley and Pauline Mounier. And as Luis said earlier before we started this podcast, either his first film or one of his first films was Love at First Fight from 2014.
Yeah, that's his first film.
And then he did one called Ad Vitam from 2018. So this is possibly his third film, possibly his most recent film. There was also a short, I guess, earlier. So, wonderful. We really enjoyed it. And unlike a lot of the films from this season of Evil Asterisk Podcast, this first season, this inaugural season, this film is about a father and son,
Yes,
as opposed
that's such
to
a good point.
a female-led film. We've had a lot of female-led films, or mother-daughter, mother-daughters. This is different. So it was kind of a breath of fresh air to have that. I should also mention, since I've been sitting on IMDb, that it did get nominated for Un Certain Regard at the Cannes Film Festival. And it has some other awards here and there.
Yeah, his first feature film, like you said, was Love at First Fight.
Yes.
In 2014.
Mm-hmm.
And then he did a short in between.
Yes.
Then he did a TV show for Netflix, I guess, called Ad Vitam.
That's the one I mentioned,
which is Latin, right? There's 6 episodes.
Yes.
And then he directed this.
Yeah.
So kind of interesting. I
Really
wonder
interesting.
if he has more credits as a writer.
Maybe.
There's 10
There are
credits
a
as a writer.
bunch of credits here. Yes, that's what it is.
Yeah,
he
was
has a lot of
mostly a
writing
writer,
credits.
I guess.
Yeah.
Interesting, okay.
So we know the premise, and we know it's about a father and a son. We can talk a little bit about what's going on in this universe. Very early on in the film, we discover that it's somewhat commonplace that people are turning into animals. Not all of them,
Yes.
but enough of them where it's not that odd. However, it has formed a dichotomy between people who want to protect the animals and people who want to destroy them.
Or the mutants, right? Because they're in the process of becoming these hybrids.
That's
almost.
true, yeah. Or they want to destroy them after they're fully animals. I don't know if it's always, oh, if I find out you're going to change, I'm going to destroy you.
Well, it seems through most of the movie that what they're doing, and we commented at the end actually, that they seem to be mostly capturing them. We haven't seen like some execution
No.
of one of them with a bullet. We have seen them getting captured.
There's a couple of things. Number one, we know that there's a center that they're keeping.
Exactly.
They're sort of isolating the
That's what they're
creatures, which they sometimes call critters, and they're hybrids. They never look full on animal. They'll have an otter with legs or a person with one wing. There was someone with a tongue, sticking out. It looks like they were going to be turning into a lizard. They're not fully there. There's a center where they're housing them, and you kind of wonder, you didn't really get this information throughout. Are they studying them? We know that there was an issue where one of the characters was put into an institution and they wanted to take them out of there and move them to the center. Like the center was going to be better.
Supposedly the center was for treatment. And then we find out eventually that that treatment could be something surgical, like someone's growing a beak and they remove the beak with surgery, which is a violence.
Let's say corrective with quotes. Surgery,
Exactly.
trying to stop them from becoming what they naturally are supposed to become.
So maybe because they are not considered 100% wild animals, that's why they don't get shot at by soldiers and police and
right,
whatever.
Because they're hybrids.
Yeah, they're still human beings
Right.
at some point. So instead what they're doing is that they're trying to grab them and bring them back to this quote-unquote center,
Right.
where they can get treated.
Treated,
But if you think about it, it's something I mentioned watching the movie with Jeannie. It's kind of how lepers were treated way back when, 100 years ago, 150 years ago. They were isolated from the population and left to fend for themselves.
Yeah, but they're not left to fend for themselves.
No,
They're
no, no,
actually being forced to be corrected, so to
No,
speak.
what I mean is once they get taken to the institution, whatever happens, happens. Once they go out of sight, no one cares anymore what happens to them.
The families care. I think for
The
the most
families
part,
do, yes,
the families
yes,
do
of
care.
course.
But I think what's interesting, I mentioned that right at the beginning of the movie, within the first 10 minutes, we realize, yeah, this universe does have these creatures, whatever they are, which are hybrids. And maybe they're in the process of turning into animals. We're not really sure. So the father and son are at a hospital toward the beginning. And then you can see in the background, there's maybe a little girl, but she has the tongue like a reptile.
I thought she had a big beak.
Oh, her tongue was sticking
Oh, it
out.
was a tongue, okay.
Like trying to, almost like a frog
Because I saw
or
her
a
face,
reptile.
and maybe I was only seeing the beak.
First thing you see was a
I
tongue.
missed that.
It was all
Yeah.
blurred out. First thing you see in the background is this tongue kind of going back and forth, sticking out and coming back in. A thin, long
Eating
tongue.
a fly, maybe, or something like that.
Right, almost like that.
Yeah.
Maybe a forked tongue. And that was when I went, oh, they're accepted, quote unquote, I thought, in this universe because they're right there with you at the hospital. But I think what was going on is that this little girl was there with her parent and they were going to try to correct this issue.
And if that doesn't work, they get sent to the institution.
Right. And then there's another area. There's a forest nearby. Some of them want to be there because they're more animal than human at that point, and they want to be left alone in the forest. They're not bothering anybody. Oh, I will mention, we've read the list of genres. I will include eco-horror and eco-thriller and eco as a prefix for this film, because it really is about ecology and animals and treatment of animals, mistreatment and being at one with the animal kingdom, which we're all a part of. Right?
I want to actually add to that because I was thinking about genre throughout this thing, and in my mind, it's basically a coming-of-age story with body horror, slash horror, and science fiction elements. So it's not necessarily a movie that will scare you, although Jeannie did jump once.
I actually
and
had a
was
couple
quite
of
loud.
scares.
There's a couple.
At least two.
Yeah, there's two, I think. Not because they were trying to terrorize people. It was
was
just
a
an
start.
opportunity to start off.
It was a bit of a jump scare.
little
bit of
bit,
a
yeah.
startling.
But it's
yeah.
not really a horror movie.
No.
I think if you're squeamish with body horror, it might get you a couple moments because they need to show that there's, as Jeannie described, a very slow transformation. In American Werewolf in London, you have 2.5 minutes that are kind of legendary.
Right.
Here, that extends over the whole movie, basically.
Yes.
You know, and she immediately figured out who's going to transform. I'm like, thank you for that. Deducted something early on.
And we won't say what that is.
And just said it out loud. I'm like, huh?
Exactly.
And my brain hadn't got there yet.
Yeah. And
So-
I actually am the one who mentioned that it was American Werewolf in London. I mentioned toward the end of the movie, actually, that this felt like an American Werewolf in London in slow motion. Because instead of the scene that Luis just mentioned, the 2.5 minute transformation metamorphosis scene, we see throughout the movie that same type of metamorphosis, but we never fully get there. We see various metamorphoses of different characters, whether they're major, minor, or insignificant to the plot. We see them at various stages of metamorphosis. It's right in front of your face. It's not hidden in the background. And by the way, we should mention production design, makeup, costuming, all really nicely done. I even said something about Cirque du Soleil. I'm not trying to bash anything. I'm saying that as a compliment, that it felt very beautiful. All of the animals, the way they were designed, the creatures, the costumes, the gravitas of the characters that were playing the creatures. Everything was very well done. Of course, the makeup, which is a major part of this.
And I think that there is CG in this, but it's done so well and
Yes.
so carefully. It looks like the heavy lifting is being done by costuming and makeup. The way each actor portrays a creature, I think CG is unavoidable, but
Yes.
they were very economical with it. Most of the energy and time, I think, was spent on costumes and makeup and all of the good stuff.
And color.
Prostheses and things like that.
Texture.
Yeah, and the design itself, was something that I mentioned watching the movie, is that it's making me think of French graphic novels from like the 60s and 70s and 80s.
Mm-hmm.
They had this really kind of retro-futuristic look, but they're very advanced. They're out there. They inspire countless horror and sci-fi movies. And the creature design is just like as good as it gets.
Well, when I mentioned the forked tongue, the long tongue, I can't imagine what that would be if it wasn't CGI. It had to have been.
That was, for sure,
Yeah. So there are little things like that, but
Yeah.
that was blurred in the background. So it wasn't done in a very obvious way that made it, oh gosh, they just slapped some. It was very tastefully done and technically proficient.
The CG is done very carefully and is very economical, which means there isn't a lot of it. Or there isn't a lot of it that you can see.
They only use it as needed. They're not trying to use it to say, look, I can
Well,
replicate this.
it's classic rule, right? The good CG you don't see. Showy CG that's like, look at me, look at this fake starship, look at this fake creature,
Right.
look at this fake mountain.
It's not look at me at all.
It's not a good thing.
And I kept thinking costuming and makeup. Felt old school to me, but still very clean and beautiful and colorful, and the textures were really there. And again, I think the actors helped too. You feel the emotion behind the makeup. You feel the emotion behind the CG if it's being used. Very well done.
It feels very organic. All the footage in the woods with the different animals or critters, which is actually the pejorative term.
I think so, yeah.
Used by the police.
These anti...
And the people who are like prejudiced and the people who are dismissive. While the PC term is victims. Because they're sick. I was saying that
to
exactly.
call them victims
That's the
when
whole
that's
point.
what they're evolving into.
Exactly,
really.
because the
Naturally.
movie is showing how even people who would be considered good see them as victims or think they need treatment.
And food.
They need help.
They could collect
Yeah.
canned goods for them, as if
Yeah.
they can't find their own food in
And then
the forest.
on the other end, you have those who think they need to be killed, that they're dangerous, that they're inhuman.
Right.
But there's no one, other than they say Sweden or some Nordic country, that's doing something where there's cohabitation and where they are accepted and reintegrated into the
Right.
natural world and the human world.
And they talked about that because there's the coming of age aspect. One of the main characters is the son. You see him with his friends or his classmates often in school. And I think they were in the cafeteria talking about this. And there's one particular character who's very pro animal or hybrid. There's a male character and a female character. They're at school. One of them is very much about collecting the food. And that's the girl, who's also the love interest of the main character, the son. And then there's also this other character who's a teenager. I think they're in high school. And he is all about being a proponent of the animals and
He's
the
an
hybrids.
ally, basically.
He's an ally. And they were talking. That's how we found out about the fact that it was done in
It was a Nordic country. It was
Okay.
either Switzerland
Sweden?
or Sweden
Yeah.
or something.
the fact that they are cohabiting. They have a cohabitation with these creatures. They're in the forest where they feel comfortable, right? It's beautiful. We talked a little bit about forest bathing as a form of meditation, well-being, and it's great for your health, mental, physical, spiritual, etc. And here they are in this amazing, beautiful forest. I don't know if you looked up where this was shot. The forest. It was beautiful. The music is wonderful. One scene in particular, I think we were watching, the father was driving the son. The son had his head out the window, and they were looking through the forest to find another character. And it was at night. You could see the forest. There was the moonlight. They were playing music, and it was just this really gorgeous road through the forest, and you're kind of bathed in it. It's just beautiful. One of the things I wanted to ask you, and maybe you caught it at the beginning, is was this simply a virus and they had no explanation for it?
They don't even say that.
They never say anything.
They don't even mention the virus.
How do we... Yeah, exactly.
Because they don't think it's infectious.
Okay.
And there's a genetic component.
Genetic component. So no one knows why all of a sudden, snap, people started mutating, let's say, or transforming.
Yeah.
And it happens with people of all ages. It happens with older people, younger people. There's the little girl I mentioned earlier. Different ages, you turn at some point. There are elderly people. Yeah. That part is a little confusing on, are we supposed to understand why and how this is happening?
I think it's supposed to be a metaphor, comparing when they're stuck in traffic in the beginning of the movie in Paris, most likely, and how the cars are not moving and it's just like chaos and everybody's hitting their horn and the whole kind of cacophony of the city.
Right.
And because of that, it's almost saying like the human body is rejecting that and embracing our wild nature.
Our nature.
Yeah, so it's like there's a point in which the city life is unhealthy.
That's interesting.
And maybe that the
to...
call of the wild symbolically is making some people return.
And it's happening all over the world. If they're talking about Nordic countries helping. And like you said, it could be a metaphor of going back to nature and rejecting society and progress and all the ills that come with that. Not everybody's embracing that, though. Some are turning and transforming, some aren't. We're not reading it literally, metaphorically. It's the will to want to go back to that in some ways.
Or like an unconscious desire to do it. Basically, the father starts the movie being very much like a health-minded, hey, I don't want to have,
don't eat those chips.
Yeah, don't eat those chips. They have all these ingredients that are bad for you. Don't use deodorants that have aluminum in them, or don't do this, don't do that. Of course, he smokes, like,
I know,
most
like
people in Europe. That's like the side of him that in a way it is his way to be back to nature, is that he's going to keep smoking no matter what, because he's wild, and at the same time, he has kind of a beatnik health nut thing about being careful about everything he eats.
Were beatniks healthy? Are you thinking hippie?
Yeah, hippies, yeah.
So you're thinking of like a commune type of mentality.
Yeah, kind of counterculture. Counterculture. Father was already kind of like that. And the movie puts this character in some very interesting predicaments because that attitude is going to be challenged. Hardcore. Mm-hmm. And he's done really well. And even though I still think the kid is the protagonist, I think the arc for the father is just perfect, like note perfect.
Father's a really interesting character.
Full character.
Without going into spoilers, the father has to juggle all kinds of emotions and needs. Ultimately, I would say the father is very much a protector and loves his family. Let's just put it that way. But there's a lot that he has to work through.
Yeah.
We can talk about the son. We did say it was a coming-of-age story, so the son does have a love interest. The son had to move to a new school, which is always an interesting struggle that kids have when they have to be taken out of one school and moved to another. One of the main plot points is that at the beginning, probably the first 20 minutes, the father and son realize that they're going to have to move into this other area in the south of France. And in so doing, the father ends up being a cook at a restaurant there, and then the son has to go to a new school, and he meets a love interest, and he also meets some other people, some of which end up becoming friends, some of which are not friends, as we would have in any other.
And there's even like
school.
A little bit of an antagonist as well that kind of develops,
right.
Which is predictable, but he's such a minor part. The bigger antagonist is really society in a way. So this kid plays a minor part in that, but it's interesting that it's there.
Also, I think that the restaurant where the father works, the owner of the restaurant is kind of creature.
Very
He even has a
prejudiced.
T-shirt that shows an X with a paw on it.
Yeah, they said
Like
I
a
like
crossing
creatures,
out.
but I want them away from me.
Cohabitation wouldn't be part of his thing. If he wants them away from him, then he's okay with them being in the forest, I would think. So there are different degrees of
Yeah.
this. And then there's another woman that works at the particular restaurant who clearly is very much pro creature and seems like the wise woman character.
The boss at the restaurant is an example of that kind of person who is a very nice person in general, someone that's very polite,
He's jovial is
and
what
warm
he is.
and jovial.
He's funny. He's like an
and-
uncle, avuncular.
But at the same time, they have prejudices against certain types of people, in this case, the people who go through this mutation. So it's to show that both things can be true. We should talk about the technical aspects of it, other than what we already said about the costumes and makeup, like the direction, the writing.
The direction was
Photography.
amazing. I love the photography. I love the direction. There were several scenes, and the ones I remember are in the forest where you follow maybe someone climbing a tree, and then you pan and you twist and you go up and you see the sky, and maybe someone's flying in the sky. Like, there are different types of human creature hybrids. Some of them fly, some of them crawl, some of them jump, some of them climb, some of them run quickly. There's all these different things. Really interesting, showing the vastness of that forest and kind of backing off and showing a larger scene, and then sort of turning the camera in an interesting way to go to a different dimension, so to speak, where you're going up and around,
Up the treetops.
down, and yeah, up the treetops, through the canopy, into the forest floor. There was a scene toward the end where one of the characters is running through a cornfield. And you're seeing that character's point of view running through the cornfield, which is wonderful. And then you go up and you see a character flying. And then you go around, you see other characters.
And there's a drone shot, beautiful drone shot, a couple of them.
Yeah, and there were characters on stilts at that point because they were part of the St. John's Feast celebration. I think that was maybe a traditional thing. And they were walking through the cornfields with stilts on.
And it's
which was
wild to see that, because usually you see normal-sized human beings running through the cornfield, and you can barely see the top of their heads. You know, maybe if it's me, you can see a little bit more, but that's it. And in this case, like Jeannie said, they are on stilts, and they're very visible. It makes for a very eerie sequence of images, and it's just definitely one of the highlights of the whole movie, I think, for me.
That was really well done.
But like she was saying, in terms of direction and photography and editing and writing, this thing is basically perfect. I found almost nothing wrong with it. Maybe I would have liked a little more intensity in certain moments. Maybe it comes out as kind of tame, quote unquote. Funny talking about tame with animals. Maybe
you're thinking in terms of horror, though?
Yeah, I mean, not just the horror, but like the drama, you know, like the stakes.
Yeah, they back off a bit. It's tame in terms of horror elements, too, in terms of gore. And
other than the body horror, there's almost nothing.
There's a little, and it's a very small amount of body horror.
Yeah.
There are, like we said, a couple of jump scares. The creatures were so creative and interesting and sometimes alarming. I feel that those are horrific elements, but the drama, as far as a feeling of dread or fear or what's going to happen now, we weren't on the edge of our seats, but we really appreciated the movie. Juggling all of those different genres is not going to necessarily make for that type of movie anyway.
So yeah, it's hard to find fault with it, because everything else, the direction is stunning. Jeannie mentioned the way he moves the camera, placement, everything. The lenses they go for and the texture feels very live and vibrant.
It feels very lush.
I think it's a temperate forest.
Yeah, it feels lush,
So
very green.
It's kind of like Vancouver, you know. It has this incredible temperate forest with, what's the plant I asked about? The
ferns.
With the ferns.
A lot of ferns.
You know.
But ferns are a thinner leaf. I'm also talking about the thicker, waxy type of leaf that we would see in a larger tree.
Very
and
tall
plant.
pines. It's just this idyllic idea of an European forest, like the Black Forest in Germany. It's just shot beautifully. It's very well edited. You don't feel like it's lagging whatsoever. It's well paced.
No strange edits. We didn't catch anything amateurish at all in this.
No weird edits, either because of lack of footage or because they're trying to build a story where there is none. No such thing. It's perfectly edited,
seamless,
perfectly directed. The music is great. It does
Love
not call too much attention to itself, but it's always there. Some really interesting rhythms as well. Technically, it's like a 10 out of 10. There's not a single thing you can point out and say, oh, that wasn't done right. It looks like it was shot on film, but most likely it wasn't because the budget is fairly low.
Now, when I think about it, it didn't look like video.
Arri Alexa. No, it's 35 millimeter. The Arri Alexa, I think, was a digital camera. I think it's both.
So it is. Interesting.
Panavision Primo lenses. So those are the lenses with the Alexa. And then they have an Ariflex 435, which I'm almost sure it's a film camera. It's a 35.
Because they said 35 millimeter.
Yeah, because that's
they mixed it? They did a mix?
They did both, I think.
Wow.
They probably did the Arri Alexa for the city and for the stuff that's supposed to look cold.
Oh.
Yeah, the Ariflex 35 is a very, very old film camera.
What did they shoot the forest scenes on?
I think they might have done some of those on the Ariflex. The Ariflex was first designed and developed by Arri in 1937. So it's an older camera. Because it's older, they can't have shot most of the movie with that. So I'm thinking that was to complement the footage of the Alexa.
Wow. They were shot differently.
So what Gemini says, and it should be taken with a grain of salt since it's not a proper source, it's saying that the cinematographer chose to use the Ariflex 35 to develop the look of the digital footage.
Oh, okay.
To basically find the exact contrast and brightness and color curves you would be getting on 35.
So use it for a test?
And use that as a visual ref for several tests.
Reference, okay.
With grain and things like that.
So how was that shot then? So it wasn't really shot? It was just done as a reference?
Yeah, most of the movie...
None of that made it?
Yeah, most of the movie, if not all of it, was shot with the digital camera.
Okay.
And then there's an article at RE.com about it. They're saying it was shot with the Alexa Mini LF. That's probably why IMDb had this information. David Cailley, who's the cinematographer, happens to be the brother of the director.
Oh, that's cool. What did he say?
So he says here, the idea was to draw the digital image from the 35mm Techniscope, 2 perforations, which I like a lot, and obtain a grainy image with a contrast curve close to film. In our tests, this blended quite well with the grain we added in post-production, so all the grain was added in post, which enabled us to give the same texture to all the images. Throughout the shoot, we filmed each set in 35.
Ha!
This served as a reference for calibrating the digital image.
Oh my gosh. That's interesting. See? So, really well done.
And part of that was the question of how, and now again I'm quoting, the question of how to render the creature's skins with prosthesis was central. From the outset, I felt that a textured image would bring softness and credibility to these effects, whether they were real, i.e. produced on set, or designed digitally.
Ooh.
So really we got our answer. We got our answer.
And also, we know to say creature.
Yeah.
And not mutant.
Yes. And Gemini was right.
Yeah,
it actually listed a source, and I clicked on the source, and I went straight to it and confirmed it.
Perfect.
So, very nice. So, now it makes sense.
All right.
I thought I couldn't shoot the whole thing in 35.
No.
It's too expensive.
That would not have made sense unless there were some heavy-duty donations or something.
Yeah, right. Or old negative, which means the quality is uneven.
Used it because they didn't spend that money. But yeah.
Wow.
That's really interesting.
This is breathtaking. This thing looks like film.
That's what I was thinking. Seamless. I'm glad that there's an article about it too.
Well, Arri is smart enough to promote it. Some filmmakers are nowadays kind of returning to 35, and now Kodak is almost dead, sadly.
Yeah.
And they're one of the last to really make 35 film. Right. So 35 film might go extinct after all. Yes. I hope not. A movie like this shows that it can be done without it. It's just something is lost. We just don't see it here because they were so careful with it.
Absolutely. Are you ready for spoilers? Okay, we're going to do spoilers. Spoiler time. Get ready. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Spoilers!
Spoiler! Alert! Spoiler! Alert! Spoiler! You have been warned.
Okay.
Okay, here we are. You could take this movie as a metaphor on autism. in a way where people who are affected, they have all kinds of degrees, right? Some people might just behave a little differently. Some might have Asperger's. Some are high functioning. Some can't speak. So you could almost take that that's how society sees the other, is the othering of human beings. And why does that happen? And how do people deal with it differently? If you really want to grab some sort of metaphor beyond the idea of humans returning to nature, it would be the concept of the mutants or the hybrid animals in this movie being representations of autistic persons. How society has a really hard time dealing with autistic kids and adults and everything in between. How some autistic persons are basically very high functioning. They're even geniuses in certain aspects. The savants, as the old term used to be. Mm-hmm. And they're better than the average human at certain tasks. They're unbeatable at certain tasks. And then you have the other side where someone is really hampered by it, where they can't really talk, or they can't hear any kind of loud noises, or they're aggressive, or they bite like an animal, which is the metaphor of this movie. So it could almost be, if you really want to push this, and I know it's pushing, but you could almost see the movie as a metaphor for the way we treat autistic individuals. We don't know what to do with them, so there's a side of us that just wants to put them in a box somewhere and pretend they don't exist.
And not cohabitate, which is kind of what they were talking about.
You know what made me think of it is a scene where two people who love each other got into a fight, and we'll get into more detail later. But the way that happened made me think, wow, it's just like someone dealing with an autistic person who's having a crisis, and the person doesn't know what to do other than move.
When the family, which is basically the father and son, and we'll talk more about the family in a moment, when they move to this other place in the south of France, and the son goes to school, he meets a person who ends up being his love interest, this teenage girl. What are we doing? We haven't mentioned any names of any characters. Okay, let's do that. The father is Francois, and the son is Émile. Julia is the cop, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And then there's Nina. Okay. Nina is the character that becomes Émile, the son's, love interest. When she is first introduced, she gets up in class and starts pummeling him with a bunch of questions. But before she does that, she gives a caveat, a warning, and says, I have ADHD, which means my brain's going to go faster than I necessarily want it to go. And I'm going to start saying things fast. And it might be weird because it looks like I'm just asking you a bunch of questions. And then she proceeds to do so.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really interesting. Now, she's mentioning ADHD, which a lot of kids, at least in the last few decades, have been diagnosed with. Same with autism, right? And we just mentioned autism. So I thought that was interesting when Luis came up with his autism theory, that a character mentions right when she introduces herself.
Yeah.
It's like we talked about, call me Ishmael.
Yeah.
She says, my name is Nina and I have ADHD and I'm going to start pummeling you with questions.
And what's kind of cool about this is that ADHD is something that a lot of adults have and it's undiagnosed. I have a suspicion that I might have it because sometimes I catch myself YouTube video on, reading an article on my computer, on Internet Archive, and my phone on Reddit at the same time. 3 things at the same time. And I get so easily bored that I always need something visual going on. Otherwise, my brain wanders.
And then I'll ask him a question and he'll say, huh?
But I have a suspicion that I might have it. It might be undiagnosed for decades now. But in the human world, having ADHD can be something that hurts you in school maybe, or makes the college more difficult, or maybe makes you like a more unreliable quote-unquote employee.
Right.
That's a stereotype at least. It's almost like a light version of the thing that affects the mutants. Just like a human character comes out in this movie and says, hey, my name is this and I have ADHD, which Jeannie just mentioned. The creatures can't come out, raise their hands and say, hey, I'm mutating into some feral pig.
Right, because they'll be relegated to the center, or they'll be hurt or killed or something.
Exactly.
So
that's why
or they'll be plied with
medicine,
ridicule, or It's great that you said that because that is true. She basically stood up and announced something that no one else can announce if they're starting to mutate. So at the beginning, toward the beginning, we had mentioned that we know immediately pretty much that this is a different type of world from ours. We see that there are these hybrid creatures and we talk about how people react to them. A very important part of this plot that wasn't mentioned in the IMDb description is that there is a mother character. The mother has become and is almost completely turned into an animal, whatever that creature may be. The reason why Francois and his son Emile are moving to the south of France is that they need to be close to this center where they're taking her. She was at a hospital. They visited her at the beginning. They are moving her to the center. They, father and son, are now going to live near the center so they can be close to the mom.
But the reason the mom is in the hospital is because she attacked Emile.
Yes.
Has a pretty big scar. It's like a 3-inch scar next to one of his eyes.
It's not really that obvious, but it's big. It's not like it's a huge difference from the rest of his face. It's just that if you look
just
closely,
a big scar,
it's like, oh yeah, he got
scratched.
And
when the mother started going through this change, the father did everything he could, including getting her strapped to a bed to try to prevent her from hurting someone or from escaping or from anything like that. And
possibly after the scratch happened. We don't know because it's all hearsay. We don't see the incident. We don't see anything with the mom at all. It's discussed. We're talking as if we saw it. There's nothing in the movie that shows the mom scratching the kid. There's nothing in the movie that shows the mom being strapped to the bed. None of that. This is all a discussion. All we know in this film is that they go to the hospital, they visit her in the hospital. They think the center is going to be better for her. At least the father, Francois, husband, feels that she's going to be better off there. The son doesn't necessarily agree with that.
Well, the son doesn't even want to move.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't want to be taken out of wherever he is now, like his school or anything. We don't see that. There's a conflict at the very beginning where Emile is very pissed off at Francois for doing any of this, for even considering moving her to the center and moving them into a different area of France.
And I think it's interesting how in the beginning you were led to think that they're all going to move inside this treatment facility that's very comfortable. You're meant to have your family members with you so you can heal faster. And even the idea of healing somehow made sense early on. And the filmmakers wanted us to think that it was possible to heal from this, become human again, to be treated. In the movie, it's implied that the father, Francois, is going to go and live with her. But of course, we immediately find out that no, he got a job working as a cook somewhere. And he's living in this small little thing, which is nice, but it's small. He's really being forced to move and taking the first job that came his way.
So I wanted to say we didn't do the other metaphor, which is the obvious one, zombie. Okay. What other metaphor can you think of someone transforming? We had discussed how we don't know why they're transforming. And the assumption, because we're so used to zombie films, might have been it's a virus. But it's not a virus. Like you said, they don't catch it from each other. It's like this evolution that might be a natural evolution, but only with certain people. Maybe they want it, really. Maybe. It's still relevant as a metaphor.
Oh, yeah, because zombies are a way to dehumanize other human beings and to see them as less than.
Yes. So when they have this situation where there's groups of people that are anti-creature, it's almost like, oh, you're inhuman, you don't matter, you're not even thinking straight. Your discussion of autism and maybe difficulty speaking, difficulty with hearing too much, because you were saying hearing loud sounds. It's like any sound sounds loud to some of them because they have such keen hearing.
And some people who are Aspergian or highly functioning autistic, they can be overstimulated with visual stuff. And they can be very sensitive to loud noises.
Yes. And then when you become a zombie, you might have a better sense of smell because you're going to eat brains or drink blood or whatever. And you can smell, you can sense these humans. So there's always that. And the idea of the other. In fact, there are updated zombie stories and films where we've seen it be a metaphor for racism and other types of societal, socioeconomic metaphors. So the zombie motif as a horror trope makes sense for this film as well, even though it's not the same thing because it's not about a virus. It's not. But it's true that you may not even have the ability to communicate in the normal fashion. So you can't get your point across, and you might be misunderstood as being an entity whose brain has devolved. And that's not the case. You're almost locked in because you can't communicate with speech. We should also say the main plot point is Emile is starting to turn and it's the long involved turn throughout the entire movie. It's
a very slow wolfening.
Yes. So even though his mother already turned, we didn't see that process. We hear about it. So again, could be a genetic component. We're not absolutely sure. There's a character in this film called Fix who becomes a friend of Emile. Fix is seen at the beginning of the movie. He breaks free of an ambulance. He has one wing and they're trying to correct his face. They clearly had put bandages on his face, so we find out later that they had removed his beak, which is horrible. And Emile befriends him in the forest and helps him learn to fly. He has two wings at that point, builds an area where he can take off and land in the water, clears out various branches for him so he can do that. And it's a wonderful relationship where you could see Emile light up because he has this friend and he realizes he's becoming more like the friend.
Yeah.
He's becoming a wolf, not a bird, but he feels accepted and Fix feels accepted by Emile.
Back to the zombie thing. Jeannie made me think of George Romero's Dawn of the Dead, where humans are getting hounded by a mass of zombies and they have to take refuge inside a mall. The animal kingdom is very much the opposite situation, where the animals or the people who are turning into animals are getting persecuted and chased after by humans. And if the humans catch them, they're going to put them in a small location and keep them away from society. So it's interesting how the zombie metaphor can almost be inverted here just because there are more humans than creatures. But eventually, let's say if there's 2 or 3 sequels of the animal kingdom, you could have a situation where the amount of human beings or Homo sapiens that have not mutated, it's something like 15% of the population. And then the zombie metaphor will be fully realized because basically the animals will take over and we would be stuck somewhere else.
Well,
the
animals
trying to survive.
are fine in the forest, though. That's
No, I know, but maybe they would turn the cities feral. Maybe the cities, yeah.
Planet of the Apes. We see as Planet of the Apes continues, that saga continues, what we are calling the cities and the buildings and all that, that's being transformed. Like a lot of post-apocalyptic zombie movies where foliage is growing over
everywhere.
All of the buildings. The buildings are not that important anymore. All of these man-made items lose their value over time, at least in these post-apocalyptic movies and when different species take over.
Yeah.
So the apes are taking over. They don't really care about that stuff. They care more about the forest, the
trees.
It's also the way they move. They're not about trying to mimic humans in any way other than having language and having the brain development. They still have the body of an ape, therefore they are more well suited to forest life.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of these animals are going to be the same way. The forest might grow into the cities.
The cities become feral. The animals kind of move in.
The man-made structures fall into ruin, but
that's what I
the
meant. Yeah.
natural elements that have been there all along just become more prominent and commonplace.
So that's just fascinating. Now, going back into a little bit of plot, in terms of storytelling, it's very, very simple. What's the motivating factor to get the whole thing started is the fact that a mom is being moved to the south of France. Why is she being moved? Because she's violent, she's dangerous, she attacked her own son. The government is like, nope, we're going to put her in a treatment center, and that's it. So they get things going. There's a road trip, which we follow. They move to the city, to this quaint little town. It has kind of a vacation feel.
Like a resort, yeah.
Yeah, it's small. People are there to have a good time. And you can tell it's a very kind of upscale, comfortable place to be.
Yeah, like the Feast of St. John's. It feels very quaint, very provincial.
Provincial is a perfect word, yeah. So, in the kid's going to school, he has a love interest, he has a new set of friends. They basically just become his friend because he's really strong.
Right. The bully ends up befriending him because he realizes that Emile is very strong. This is where he starts to turn. We see him holding his own on one side of a tug of war. Everybody else fell, and he's still there holding it. And then they all get back up and like, oh, and then the other side is the bully with his friends. And he's like, whoa, come to my party on Friday night.
Exactly. In Brazil, tug of war is called cabo de guerra. And actually, I was incredibly good at it growing up.
I know. I'm thinking to myself, I have the worst grip in the world, and I remember getting rope burns on my
I have
hands.
very long arms and long legs, and I think that made a difference. I was leveraging myself.
I have very long arms arms and long legs, but I have a horrible grip.
Well, it's because Jeannie plays the piano and she needs the finesse. I don't play the piano.
I think that's
so.
the only reason that I can think of that's a good one.
That's it.
I've thought of that.
Fine motor skills.
I wonder what would have happened had I had better grip, not getting into music, not becoming a pianist. Who knows?
That's when the slow change starts to happen, and we follow it very closely, and it's very well done. And there's this interesting character of a female cop who, in my mind, is interested in the father somehow.
Yes, she is.
And there's almost something implied that could have happened, or it could happen in a sequel, or it could happen in the future. The only thing is, toward the end, the father does something that might prevent him from having any kind of relationships. In defending his kid, the father eventually kills a guy by accident.
Toward the end of the film, Francois, the father, and his son, Emile, are in an office with a police officer. So why are they there? It's because the night before, Emile...
He was found with a bunch of animals in the forest. The army mounted an operation to trap as many creatures as they could. And in doing so, the kid was in the middle of it because he was looking for his mom.
Emile was found in the forest with a bunch of other animals. No one assumes he's turned. He's dressed normally. If you saw him on the street, you would say, yeah, he's a human being. He's not turning into a creature. This turning has been happening, as we said, in slow motion throughout the movie. He's getting things like claws poking out of his fingers. His spine has changed, so you can easily cover that up, and then hair and all kinds of stuff. But what had happened the night before, and they didn't know this, is that the bully character saw him and his love interest girlfriend, Nina, out in the, I think they were near the cornfield. And
in the middle
who knows
of it.
what they were doing, making out. We didn't see the full thing. He saw that, and he realized, because he saw his back, I'm assuming,
That's what happened.
that he was turning. One of the horrible things that this bully and other characters that are trying to hunt down the creatures have, they have a special thing, almost like a dog whistle.
That's what it is.
They made an interesting choice in using this electronic device that emits this high frequency sound. No one in the movie can hear it unless they're a quote-unquote creature or turning into a creature. But of course the audience hears it. So not only do we hear it because we are watching the movie from the point of view of this main character, Emile, but there's also that other side where humans of any type could have this tendency to be more of this feral, animal-like entity. Or we're singled out as being that. How do we know that not everybody can hear it? So it's an interesting thought that certain people, maybe all of us, can hear this high frequency electronic sound. So because the bully uses this to further test his theory that Emile is indeed turning, transforming, he finds out that yes, indeed, that is the case. And of course, Emile scratches him. He runs away, runs to the cornfields. They're at this Feast of St. John's at this point. All these people with the ammunition, they look very rednecky all of a sudden. They get in their cars and they take out their guns and they're all trying to chase down whatever, because they don't know who it is, running through the cornfields. And then they see, sadly, Fix, who's trying to help his friend. Fix is flying overhead and he ends up attacking some of the characters, and then there's like ones on stilts.
And one of the guys on stilts buys it basically and gets murdered.
He bites the dust. There's a disconnect where not everybody knows that it's Emile that was found out, because Fix deflects that and does a bit of sleight of hand, sleight of wing.
Yeah. The guy bought the farm, quite literally. It was a farm.
He did buy the farm. So sadly, during that incident, Fix does fall to the ground because he gets shot at, and Emile runs to his aid, but sadly Fix does die at that point. And then, as we discussed earlier, Emile is discovered among the creatures of the forest. Before he's discovered, he also reunites with his mother temporarily. He knows where she is now in the forest because she had escaped from the truck. And actually, that's something I meant to mention earlier. It was a plot point.
Oh, yes.
The plot point is that all of a sudden we started seeing creatures on the loose. Mm-hmm. And that's where some of the jump scares came from. Emile was looking at his window and all of a sudden, whoo, there's this creature. And then they realized that they escaped from this truck. They were heading to the center and they escaped. So that means the mother was part of that group. So a lot of the movie is about them trying to find the mother.
Yeah.
She's in the forest somewhere. Emile, after this Feast of St. John's incident, he's running through the cornfield. He ends up in the forest after he says goodbye to his friend who's dying. He dies in his arms, basically. He does find his mom. They reunite. He's discovered there among the forest creatures But no one assumes, as I said, because he looks like a human being, no one assumes he's turning or in the process of turning. And they take him and reunite him with his father. Well, he and his father go to this police station. They have to fill out a report. And the guy was trying to make it easy on them. He just says, okay, you were there. You lost your way. You didn't know the creatures. He was going to just stamp it. But, of course, Emil can't sign his name. Yeah. He's getting to the point where his motor skills are impaired. First, he had a problem speaking. Now he has a problem writing. Different things are changing in him. The father's there with him. And the police officer finally realizes, wait, there's something wrong. Because the kid growls at him too. He was about ready to take his gun and shoot the kid because that's how idiotic these people are. And of course he thinks that he's going to be killed by the kid, but it doesn't look dangerous at all. He just is acting quote unquote erratically. Your idea of autism, it could be a similar display.
Yeah,
he couldn't really write his name.
Could be.
And he was frustrated and he growled. That's not enough to kill.
In a threatening manner.
Maybe, but that's not enough to kill someone.
A cop would
He didn't even have fangs or
a lot of, autistic
nothing.
people get killed all the time by cops.
For no reason. Yeah, exactly. So the father thinks very quickly, moves very fast, sees that the police officer's about to take out his gun. And he does something. He
pushed him.
And he pushes him so hard, I think the police officer knocks his head against the wall or against a corner. And he falls down. He's either concussed, unconscious, maybe a file cabinet. So we don't know. He looks pretty much gone, but he could just be concussed or knocked out.
I just realized that.
He could be dead. He could be just concussed. But the point is they need to get out of there. So at that point, that's when they run. And that was the scene you were wanting to talk about. Yeah, that's
a point of no return for the father, for Francois. Because that means that even if his kid escapes free in the woods, because the cops have Francois, he would be sent to jail. So whatever possible love story that could happen between him and the female cop.
She's Julia, I think.
Yeah, Julia Izquierdo. That could happen if he let go of his wife because she's an animal now in the jungle living her life. So it's like a divorce of some sort. If he were to let go of that and actually give in to some relationship with this female cop, that's out the window now because he attacked the cop, either killed him or injured him.
So at the end, I know that we had this discussion. He was smiling in the car. He seemed to be very happy to let his son be reunited with his wife, his son's mother, and let them live in peace. Mm-hmm. You said, oh no, he's going to jail. And I said, you know what? I don't think he cares.
Sure.
That's what's interesting about the father. He's a true father and a true husband. All he cared about was protecting his wife, protecting his child, and he's happy that they're reunited. He knows that he can't live out there with them, and he knows he might be going to jail, but I don't think he cares about that.
I think you're right, but I want to raise one thing about that final drive, where he lets the kid out and the kid runs for his life and runs free, hopefully.
Yeah.
Remember how the kid can't speak anymore in the room with the cop and can't sign his name?
Right.
And then once they get into the car, the kid is like dead at first. And then there's a shift. And suddenly the kid is speaking as if nothing happened and talking about a trip they had. They went skiing somewhere. And they're talking about how Francois seemed to be in wonder of this landscape and admiring the nature and the snow and the colors, probably the Alps, and how in reality he was admiring the mechanical components of the ski lift. So it was kind of hilarious, and the kid is laughing and Francois is laughing. And you know what I'm thinking? I don't think this conversation really is happening. I think that this is literally the father in his head looking at his son that he loves so much, and in a way wishing that the old kid was there still, but at the same time accepting reality for what it was and accepting that the kid needed to be free and needed to be whatever he was.
But think of the topic of the conversation. I think it's a metaphor. You're talking about not seeing the forest for the trees, pun intended. It's the idea of whether or not the kid really did temporarily flip back and say that before he left. He could have, but let's just say you're right. It doesn't really matter. The point is that it's about Francois, and it's about him not seeing the big picture and not seeing the forest and only looking at the mechanism of how this one thing in that much larger area worked. And they're laughing about it, whether or not this is a real event. He had been enclosed and focusing only on one thing. Focusing only on trying to save his family, focusing on wanting the mother to not do anything to the son, focusing on maybe strapping her down, hoping that she would not change, focusing on keeping the son, not letting him eat certain foods, micromanaging, micro focus. And maybe now his world is going to be enlarged because of the experience of letting his wife and son go and be whatever they need to be in this much larger universe of the forest and not focusing on these small details. It's almost like letting things go and seeing, because he missed it. He missed the wonderful world that he was in because he was so focused on that ski lift. I think that's what this is about.
This is such a good point, and it immediately told me how the sequel would work for this. You could literally have a second movie that opens up with him finishing some sort of a jail term of like 3.5 years in jail or something like that, assuming the cop wasn't actually killed. And it could be that he literally comes out of jail and the female cop that was interested in him decides to recruit him for a new task team that needs to deal with these creatures slash mutants and reintegrating them to society, dealing with trouble cases. And there could literally be a sequel where he uses the talent and what he learned in the first movie to see the big picture, to let go, to have empathy and compassion for the other, and to use those skills as a kind of in-between between the establishment, between the government, between the military, between the police, and between this new society that's starting to happen.
It could be a new universe, a new world that would be explored in multiple films, but I think that this film stands alone, and I feel satisfied with the ending. It's a movie that allows me to think about the big picture. It allows me to think about nature, about animals, about the way people treat beings that they don't understand, or people that they just don't understand, or even animals. That idea of going back to nature, the idea of forest bathing, the ecology aspect of this film, I think is really important. And I don't know that it needs to go into, oh, how is he going to work with the police? That seems very banal to me. But I might eat my words. Maybe they are going to do a sequel. I just don't feel like it needs a sequel.
Despite me having an idea, a clear picture of what a sequel would look like, I doubt that there is anything like that in the works. I don't think their goal was to have a franchise with this. But I'm speaking to my desire to see more of this world, to see more of this alternate reality that they created here. I think it's fascinating. It's almost if you look at Avatar. You could say that the first Avatar is self-contained and it's fine, one and done. But, the second one came out, and now the third one's coming out in December, and he's already shot 4 and 5. Why? Because Cameron thought that there was a really fascinating universe there, and he wanted to tell multiple stories. He wanted to advance the story of the protagonist, but also tell different stories within the same world. I feel like this is such an interesting world that was created, and there's a side of me that wishes we could see what happens next.
One of the things that I really wanted to see, because it was just on the periphery, I wanted to see more about how this new society is living with each other. All these different animals, different species, how are they able to get along? How are they able to live with each other? It's not like they're all one species. They're different species. And to pick up where you started, how are different human societies handling this phenomena of humans transforming into these creatures? You had said, in some Scandinavian country, we had talked about that earlier, that there's a cohabitation. How's that working out? There's also things that aren't working very well. And maybe it does make sense, in retrospect, to have some sort of continued tale. I think another thing I wanted to see is more of the creatures, because the costumes, the makeup, all of that was so good. And everybody has a transformation story. Before they get fully transformed, do we have any more information about how they got that way, why they got that way? Maybe there is a reason that we can pinpoint of why this is happening to certain people.
Speaking to your point, yeah, some animals are predators and some animals are prey. So they would end up eating each other. That's nature. You let a dog loose a bunch of cats, he's going to eat some of them. That's how it goes. So it's not like the idyllic idea that these new types of animals based on humans are going to be automatically for peace.
We didn't get any hint that there was any strife in the forest between the animals. I don't remember seeing any of that. There was no predator-prey behavior from what I could see.
You're right.
It doesn't mean that it wasn't happening, but they weren't showing that. They showed it as an idyllic Eden, but there was an interesting creature that appeared at one point. One of the characters that was on stilts for this whole St. John's thing was wandering along the city at some point late at night after the whole cornfield incident. I love this background stuff that they did a few times with the scene in the hospital where the girl's tongue was coming out of her mouth in a weird way, like a reptile. We had another blurry background sequence where a creature that had 2 arms and 2 legs but was crawling, super skinny, looked like a spider and a small head. Didn't look like a normal transformation into a creature. And it wasn't a hybrid, from what I could tell. It looked like, were those feet?
They were human limbs.
It was very creepy. That was another little horror element. It kind of made you wonder about the creatures and why were some of them roaming around the city. Why were some in the forest? Maybe they're not all in the forest. Maybe some of them were hiding and they wanted to be in the city. We don't know. And then could there be some quote unquote horrific creatures that would terrorize either humans or other creatures? And maybe that's where the room might be for a sequel.
I think so. I think this is basically what Dawn of the Planet of the Apes did, the new trilogy, that just kind of started a new trilogy. I think we just had 1 new movie on the series. We had 3 of the modern retellings of the Planet of the Apes, and then it was a new one that started a new thread. And the original trilogy from the modern movies, of course, because the old ones are like from the 70s, does that very well in terms of telling a human story, telling an ape story, and how the civilizations evolve. And I just think when you create a good world, a solid world with some heft to it, it's kind of a waste not to tell the next story and not to go into different points of view, not going to different time periods. You don't have to explain the mutations. You don't have to go and say, hey, it turns out it was a virus after all. We don't need that.
I think it still works as a standalone film that doesn't have a sequel. I don't think it was a waste. I actually like films that leave you wanting more and that won't necessarily give you that because it allows you to finish the story yourself. It allows you to anticipate what might happen in this universe. It's a thinking person's film and it allows us to have these conversations.
I will write to the writer-director and ask him if there's anything
in the works.
Because even financially for someone who's an independent filmmaker like this, it could be very profitable to have a franchise that's yours. I want to find out if there's anything that they're working on.
I would too.
For final thoughts, this is very satisfying coming-of-age drama with perfectly executed horror and sci-fi elements. It's just scary enough in terms of startling you a couple times when you don't expect it. The technical side's perfect. Makeup, the best, probably. I don't see how anything can be better than what they pulled off in this.
Impeccable direction.
Yeah, impeccable direction.
Great
editing,
dialogue,
writing,
great writing.
Story all of
is really
all
interesting.
Of it. You know, for me, this is like a very solid 8 out of 10. I'm only taking it down 2 points because I prefer my movies to have much higher stakes, to generate more suspense.
I agree.
Like Jeannie said earlier, to put you at the edge of your seat. And this is not something that happened here.
No.
It was more like a fascinating journey, like full of feeling, full of pathos. It's more of a coming-of-age story with some elements that you usually don't find in it.
It evoked a lot of feelings. Like you said, the pathos was there. The dog itself, we didn't talk about Albert, but the dog was there as an interesting bridge between Emile and the other characters that are turning like Fix. There's the dog, the character who's a complete animal and didn't transform from being a human to an animal. He's there for Emile to comfort him as he's turning. We saw him jump into the tub.
The dog is one of the problems of the movie.
Oh, you have a problem with the dog.
There's no resolution to the dog. We're meant to be afraid that dog's gonna get eaten.
Oh.
Dog's gonna save someone. Dog's gonna play a role.
I think he's a bridge.
He got dropped.
No, I don't think so. I think it was very intentional.
No, I know that. But as a viewer, it's like Chekhov's gun. If you're gonna show a gun, you better use it.
But it's not... I think what it was doing was showing us as viewers how affectionate we are to domesticated animals in the animal kingdom. Ones that not only were not hybrids or transformed from humans naturally or unnaturally, but ones that are specifically domesticated, not ones that are wild, not ones that live in the forest, and showing the way those animals have instincts to protect and help and care for their owners. Albert was put there as a reminder of how we treat certain animals. And I said that I think Albert is a bridge between the humans and the human-animal hybrid, who ends up being a different type of animal in the forest that might not even look like a hybrid eventually. I don't know that we saw any that didn't. They were all hybrids. Maybe they never fully transform into complete animals. I think that's what Albert was there for. I see your point, though, but I don't think it was a problem.
For me, every time you have an unfinished thread in your movie that you dangle like that, it needs to be done so carefully because otherwise you start to create some anticipation in your audience. And then at the end, that anticipation goes to waste.
I didn't have any anticipation.
But I did. I was worried about the dog. I cared about the dog.
Right.
And in the end, that was wasted because...
I was worried about Fix, and Fix did die. Fix played the role, and it made more sense, in my opinion, to have Fix play that role. Going back to the pathos, I was saying that the animal was the caretaker. The animal, in a way, was a parent in the movie and was there as a constant in the movie. And then we have the Fix character. They had this romance, and you felt for him. His beak was removed. He was already transforming to the point where he never fully spoke language that could be recognized by a human without having some bird sounds interspersed. Because he had already started to transform with the language, we never heard him as just speaking French. He had that clucking sound.
From the introduction in the ambulance, he was already making animal sounds.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying that we never see him as that. So it shows a different stage. It shows the stage that Emile is going to get to, and he's starting to get to toward the end. Yeah. But then there's that love that was happening. I felt this compassion for this character through Emile's eyes. And Emile would light up. He was being like a grumpy teenager. And then he would light up when he hung out with Fix. He wanted to help him so badly.
There was a sense of brotherhood and friendship, literally as them being brothers, because they were both going through changes at the same time. And Fix was like an older brother. He was there first.
But Emile helped Fix.
Which is sometimes what happens with older brothers and younger brothers.
Because Fix couldn't fully fly, and Emile helped him learn to fly, even though Emile hadn't been transformed yet fully. I also want to say about Nina, she accepts him. So I thought that was interesting. She's the one who had mentioned she had ADHD. They get together. She discovers, because they take their shirts off and she feels his back, she said, "Oh, I knew it. I knew you were transforming." Mm-hmm. And she was so happy for him. Yeah. It was like she felt that he was being his true self, because it was so awkward for him around other people as he started to transform in school. All these things that were happening. She probably saw herself in him because he reacted to the sounds of the ferrets in the lab. She probably had that too, and she could get it. And then she realized, for her, it's ADHD. For him, it's transforming into a creature. And she felt a communal feeling at one with him in a way, even though she wasn't transforming into a creature. I think she felt connected to him because he had symptoms that were similar to hers. And that goes back to your, even though it wasn't autism, it goes back to your discussion of autism.
Because you mentioned her, I just realized that in the sequel, she's going to pick up Francois in the jail with a 2-year-old. You know?
Maybe they did have sex. We don't know.
Yeah.
But
so that's funny. That's what I...
Or maybe she visits him in the forest and they get it on. We don't know what happens.
So, yeah. So what do you think? Well, what is your rating?
Oh, I would definitely give it a thumbs up. I wouldn't give it a super hearty thumbs up on the horror angle, but I don't give it a mild thumbs up either. I give it a nice, stable thumbs up. It made you think. There were definitely horror elements in it. It's not necessarily what you would think about when you think of a horror film, but it did have body horror. It did have a little bit of gore. It did have some jump scares that were intriguing because they always ended up being a really cool look. It was a cool creature look, and that's fun. And there were lots of creatures. They weren't necessarily all scary, but there were some that were. And there were some hints in the background, like the weird spidery creature. You kind of wonder what's going to happen there. And there's the horror of humanity. People being horrific people. The psychological horror, the horror of society, the eco-horror elements. I think that all works together. It's a lot to do. It's very ambitious to make sure the film hits all those genres. Yeah. Without going into exploitation territory, without going too far into one. I think the filmmaker did a wonderful job of balancing and juggling a lot of different genres. And yes, it does leave room for more, which is not a bad thing.
I think that it's, like you said, a very hard balancing act to pull off. And to do that at a fairly small budget, think about it. What kind of an achievement this is? Mm-hmm. You know, it's hard to do this kind of movie, and to do it well is harder. Even if, like Jeannie said, this is not a traditional horror movie, it has enough genres in it to make it supremely interesting. It moves fast, doesn't overstay its welcome, even if it's a little over 2 hours. It's just like a perfect little gem that I'm surprised more people don't know about.
Yeah, I totally agree. Let's say we give it 2 thumbs up.
Yes.
Solid.
Solid. Solid as a rock.
Solid as a rock. Solid as a beak that should not have been removed from Fix's face. How about that?
Yes.
I want to find that beak and put it back on his face, but sadly he died.
Yeah.
All right. Now it's time to bid you
adieu.
Bye.
For now.
For now. Toodaloo.